You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
Did you ever want to forget anything? Did you ever want to cut away a piece of your memory or blot it out?
I hate the thought of being so far away from you, but we'll be together again someday.
I would tussle with the most dangerous animal in the world. A woman. Hey, you! Come on if you want to ride. What's your name?
You can call me Vera if you like. There's a folding bed behind this door.
One night a man came in, tiptoeing in. I had a scissors in my hand. I struck at him. I ran away. He was lying in the hole. Blood around him.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise. And at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we are doing a Robert Mitchum double feature, and we are big fans of Mitchum on this show. So join that sleaze.
That's right. We'll leave it at that. We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for the film that we cover as well. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we are coming up on having completed 8 years of bonus episodes. There are 200 bonus episodes of this show, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films, which we just dropped our special spooky bonus transmission, 6 new horror movies that we just talked about. We've done 60 plus of those. So if you haven't made the jump yet, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast, we would recommend doing that. It helps us out a lot. And speaking of which, we had a huge list. October is always a big month. You guys love the spooky movies out there, yeah. And a ton of you signed up this month. So forgive me for going so quickly through this, but we had Chris Knight sign up. We had Crabtonculus. We had Samantha Moorfield. We had Terrence. We had Trans Vin Diesel. Awesome. Matt Randall, B-Mac, Jenkum Terry. I love when they make me take advantage of reading out the names. Yeah. Oates, Tyler, John Eden, Emilio R.A., Claire Osborne, Lee Sunroth, the third, S. Jeremy Ball, Matthew Price, Mega Powers Erect, who signed up for an entire year of the show because you get a little bit of a monthly discounted rate if you sign up at the annual tier. We had Jonathan Martin sign up, Doc Bones, Bacon Wheats, Winnie to Livra, Alex, Coalhouse Walker, Hardy, Zabitzer, Steve, Ben Murray, Jordan Cook, Hessa Denny, friend of the pod, guest of the pod, Hessa Denny. I don't know what episode she wanted to listen to, but you could have just asked for it, girl. I would have sent it to you. Mark Addison, Pog Animal Man, Caroline Johnson, Jonathan Chromecack, Brady Turner, Amrit, and last but not least, Ryan Scott. So thank you. My God, that was a lot of you for this month. We really appreciate that support and hope you're enjoying all those bonus episodes.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, that's the one plug for the week. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're listening on either one of those platforms, give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners, and we appreciate that support as well. And the last plug, as always, is merch. Once again, we are out here hawking the, I guess we can't call them brand new anymore. They've existed for a few months now, but we have a Sleazoids dad cap and a Sleazoids t-shirt designed by good friend of the pod, Brandon Lim of Black Belt Cinema, who did a nice blowout themed Sleazoid shirt with lots of our favorite 80s films that we've covered on the show, including Videodrome and The Beyond and To Live and Die in LA. So if you're interested in that, the link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back another week. As always, I'm your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I believe 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over on the main feed would have heard from us, where we would have been in the thick of the Spooktober season with friend of the pod, Trevor Henderson, who did the original design for the show. And we always invite on at some point during the spooky season because he loves horror films and he loves showing us horror films we've never seen before, which he did with his episode 2 weeks ago on Anthropophagus from 1980, which I can now say. I couldn't say it throughout the rest of the episode, but I can now say the title of the movie.
I was too nervous to say it throughout about the whole thing, so I just avoided it at all costs.
Yeah, I sounded like a bozo on the actual episode, but now I can say the title of the movie. But we paired that with The Slayer from 1982, and both of these were 80s video nasty slashers set on sort of remote, atmospheric, sort of island locales, one by Joe Tomato, that had more of that sort of Italian cannibal zombie gore film mixed with the gothic horror. And then we had the other by J.S. Cardone, which had more of a sort of eerie psychological premonition slow burn horror film, but it was interesting.
Yeah. And both did kind of have like a gothic feel. In particular, I'm remembering that one scene where there's like this massive kind of epic scale of a hanging that they use the entire kind of mansion set, and it's very creepy, and honestly it takes its time until it gets into the whole cannibalism Italian stuff. For a lot of it, it's just kind of showing off the property that they were using, and it's creepy. It's nice.
Yeah, we were kind of in a gothic mood, which was why last week over on the bonus feed exclusively for the patrons, it was the sort of the Halloween episode, or it was the last episode before we were wrapping up the spooky month. We knew it had to be a special one. So we finally talked about James Whale's Frankenstein from 1931, obviously starring Boris Karloff as the creature. And, you know, it was a huge canon horror film we somehow hadn't discussed on the show yet. The dialogue from it appears in our spooky theme song, so it was about time. But when we were coming up with a pairing, we decided we wanted to instead of talking about Bride of Frankenstein or maybe doing one of the sequels or Abbott and Costello, we were like, no, we're going to skip all the way to Hammer horror, and we decided we were also going to talk about Terence Fisher's Curse of Frankenstein from 1957 with Peter Cushing as Dr. Frankenstein and Christopher Lee as the monster in that one. So we had a pretty gothic horror 2 weeks.
Yeah, and both have things that I love about it. I mean, the original, the production is incredible, the performances, but there is something really interesting about the 50s version where, they make Victor Frankenstein just completely evil. Like there's just no redeeming quality about him by the end of it. So I did like seeing the two different versions. And
50s audiences were like, what would it look like if the monster got his eye shot by a rifle and you saw like the blood drip in like Eastman color? And
it's crazy. They're very different, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, it was two different eras of gothic science fiction monster horror is what we were talking about last week over on the Patreon. So again, if you're interested in that, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast, go back and check it out. But moving on to this week, we are joined by a very special guest, one that we picked very selectively because we were like, it is Noirvember, and there are very few people out there who are, we think specialists in this particular field that we talk to, at least on the regular, or who have told us they listen to our show. So we knew we had to have her on. She is a New York Times bestselling and Edgar-winning author of such books as Dare Me, The Fever, You Will Know Me, The Turnout, most recently El Dorado Drive. She has also written for, developed, and produced TV shows. She has taught at NYU. She's been nominated for more writing awards than I can list here, and has had her writing appear in many more places that I'm sure you have seen. And if you are a film fan, she is just an excellent writer and thinker on crime fiction. You might have even read one of her essays in one of those Criterion Collection booklets that you have bought. I know I have. So thanks so much to Megan Abbott for coming to the show. Megan, how are you doing?
Good. So happy to be here to talk about my favorite subject. So it should be a delight. Really excited.
Yeah, I mean, you wrote an incredible essay on Peeping Tom, which was, I think, when it clicked for me, because I was like, that's one of our favorite movies we've ever talked on the show. And it was when it clicked that I was like, maybe she'd want to come on our show at some point. I know that she had like found us through Letterboxd, and and I was like, maybe this is the time. And so we finally just reached out and we were like, would you want to talk about noirs? And she was like, would I like to talk about noirs? What do you mean? So Megan, thanks so much for joining us. And as this show goes, we have the guests select the double features that we watch for the week. So what two films have you brought with you this week to kick off Noirvember for our listeners, and why did you pair them together?
Yes, it's The Seventh Victim from 1943 and Detour from 1945. And they're two classic noirs to me. I mean, Detour is sort of the ground zero of noir for many people. Seventh Victim is lesser known and sort of noir horror, gothic noir, and is a little lesser known. But to me, I rewatched Seventh Victim about a year ago, and immediately I thought of Detour. And in some ways, they're like a male and female version of the same movie. They're both really very like pitch black, rather nihilistic movies.
Jesus, yeah, both endings.
But things are as dire as you get the ending, and they both really have this dreamlike quality. They're kind of underpopulated movies. There's actually not that many people in the movie, not many characters, not many people in the frame. The spaces they're in are kind of underpopulated, so somehow that sort of makes it feel more real and more like they're coming straight from our unconscious. So the Detour, I guess, is sort of the better known of the two. It is sort of a classic noir story of a young man who just makes one mistake and then sort of falls into a sort of
just
sinking
spirals out of control. A tale as old as time.
Yes. and forces conspire against him, and he meets really truly one of the most terrifying women in all of film noir, Anne Savage, who sort of is the kind of the embodiment of punishment in the movie. So it's kind of a mythic movie in many ways, and also very shabby, has continuity errors. It's kind of a mess, but is also based a work of genius at the same time, directed by the great Edgar Ulmer. And Seventh Victim, which really comes from, many people know Val Lewton, the great auteurist producer, and he's done so many great horror movies we all love, Cat People and Leopard Man. But this one, Seventh Victim, I think is a little off the grid, but it's the story of a young woman who finds out her sister is missing in the dangerous streets of the village in New York City, and she uncovers a lot of dark secrets about her sister, and it's a deeply haunting movie, and it's almost like you can't believe the movie's made, because it has some of the most chilling images that you've ever seen in a movie, including two images of a hanging noose that will definitely be burned in your brain thereafter. So
yeah, these are two that always surprised me that were made in like the Code era, because they have such a bleakness and such a darkness, and are saying some, they have some transgressive qualities to whether they're addressing the idea of Satanists or whether they're addressing the idea of an unreliable protagonist and some of the things that he's going through. And I think the subtext of Detour is a much scarier movie than I think its plot kind of describes to you. The dreamlike quality, I think, is important to both of them that you've already highlighted for sure.
Yeah, the nihilism that both these movies kind of allow is pretty wild, considering too, we were talking about just with Frankenstein, just how some of those decisions they made were because they wanted to kind of end in some type of uplifting note, even if you're watching the monster, die and burn alive or whatever. With this, it's like kind of the missing details adds to the mystery. There's an unreliable narrator aspect specifically to Detour that really kind of ends up working with some of the missing parts, possibly.
Yeah, I think they both really smuggle in a lot of subversive stuff. They're both under 70 minutes long, I should add, so you can watch them back to back.
You're our favorite guest who's ever come on the show.
They get right to the plot right away, but there's so many ways to read them both. They're deeper text than they sort of might feel on the surface. I mean, you can sort of watch them as a straight crime story and as a straight sort of horror story, but once you start probing it, all this sort of stuff looms forward, and you really feel like the directors Mark Robson, The Seventh Victim, and Edgar Ulmer and Detour are really getting a lot of like crazy stuff in there that really makes them exciting.
Under such B-noir like limitations as well, which we'll talk about sort of when we get into the sort of logistics of how these productions went. But this is a fantastic, as good an intro as we're going to get, so we're going to jump right into it. Now, Megan, we typically we go chronologically, but sometimes also A picture, B picture in terms of popularity. Do you have one that you want to tackle first?
No, your call. I think that, chronologically, I guess Seventh Victim comes first, but since Detour is maybe the more famous, maybe that's the way to go. What do you think?
Sure. I mean, they're not necessarily connected by chronology, so I'm down to do Detour first if it makes the most sense. So let's do it. Let's jump right into it. Let's talk Detour.
I'm the lucky one. I can't. Even if you did tell the cops I was in on it with you. What could they do to me?
Give a lift to a tomato, you expect it to be nice, don't you?
All right, we are talking Detour, the 1945 American B-noir thriller directed by Edgar G. Ulmer, written by Martin M. Goldsmith, who was adapting his own 1939 novel Detour, An Extraordinary Tale, and starring Tom Neal as a depressed New York nightclub pianist named Al Roberts, who decides to hitchhike his way to Los Angeles to reconnect with an old girlfriend named Sue, and ends up in a kind of nightmarish descent involving accidental dead bodies and blackmail, and one of the all-time great vicious femme fatales, Vera, played by Anne Savage, as Megan has already pointed out. This is our second time on the show actually talking about legendary B-movie specialist Edgar G. Ulmer, the Austrian set designer turned director who, alongside many filmmakers working in Germany during the German expressionist sort of silent era, where he claims to have worked along on Fritz Lang's M and F.W. Murnau's Metropolis, though some of the claims are not verified, fled to America and brought his talents to Hollywood, his first major job of which was working on the art direction for Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans in 1927. And his work for Murnau and the general success Universal was having, hiring various sort of German expressionists to, if not direct, at least shoot and light and production design their new popular run of monster horror films like Dracula and Frankenstein, like we talked about last week. Thanks so much, Megan, for making the perfect transition pick between actually our spooky month and our noir month. These both contain that, but it led to Universal hiring him to do the first big on-screen crossover between Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff, which is the other film of his that we've talked about, an extremely loosely suggested by Edgar Allan Poe film called The Black Cat from 1934. Megan, I'm assuming you've seen and love The Black Cat.
Absolutely great. Yes, it's spectacular.
It is one of my favorites that we've discovered on the show, because we hadn't seen it, I think, before. And it's just like the idea of doing this like bleak and gothic tale of a Hungarian doctor and World War I veteran just going head to head with an Austrian architect and army commander who like built this mansion on top of like this mass battlefield grave is such an image that has stuck with me. And Ulmer's gift for expressionist lighting and the labyrinthian architecture and just that atmosphere of death has really, carried that one through. And that one being Pre-Code is the one where you're like, oh, these characters are going to like torture each other and like entomb each other's wives, and there's Satan worship in 1934 and ritualistic kidnapping. And it's not just two of the best actors of all time having like an eyebrow off between each other. It is a haunting and a kind of upsetting movie from 1934. And so I was glad that was the other one we talked about, because I do think it kind of informs a little bit of how you watch Detour if you know that that's where he came from, especially because there's so much directorial skill and command over the budget he was allotted to for The Black Cat. And for people who maybe aren't aware of Edgar G. Ulmer, that should have probably landed him a lucrative deal, the same one that like James Whale got. And we probably should have seen like Edgar G. Ulmer's like The Wolfman or something like that. But unfortunately, he had an affair with the wife of the nephew of Universal Studio head Carl Laemmle Jr. that got him expelled and blacklisted in Hollywood for basically the rest of his career. And he spent the rest of his life making B movies at Poverty Row production houses like PRC, like Producers Releasing Corporation, who did this. And that is where Detour is born from. So he didn't, by his own wishes, necessarily make one of the most all-time great, all-time famous B budgeted noir films, but he sure as hell took advantage of it.
Yeah. I mean, do you know how much of this was cut down? Like the reason that this is a 70-minute film and it has kind of this because to me when I watch this, it still
there's
feels
dueling
complete.
Stories on the production of this one, because Ulmer says that he shot it in 6 days and shot it for $20,000. Many people, he loved to kind of self-mythologize and kind of exaggerate about his career a little bit. He called himself actually the Frank Capra of PRC at one point, and supposedly the people who have actually researched this, it seemed like more like it was a 14 or 21 day shoot, and he might have had more like $100,000.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
I think that's also illegitimate because they cook those books. It's probably somewhere.
It's so true.
They, I doubt it was 6 days, but I'm sure anyone who sees the movie knows it's not 21 days.
That is for sure. Yeah, that is for sure.
I think that is one of the things that is impossible. There's a great biography of Ulmer that Noah Eisenberg, who I believe is his grandnephew, and he sort of talks a lot about trying to nail down how long it took to shoot. But the book is to the 2 points of view, both the Tom Neal character and his girlfriend who's in LA who's going to. And so one of the things they did do is immediately just have it wholly from the male point of view, which cut things down a lot.
It sounded like there was controversy on whether they shot some of the other stuff or not. But again, it's funny. The production of this movie is almost as much of like a weird, unreliable mystery as the movie is. But yeah, the Martin Goldsmith book, from what I understand, a lot of people seem to say that the overall like plot and arc of it is fairly true. But there were some sort of specific details about like the main guy being sort of Jewish that was sort of stripped from the movie because his name is Alexander Roth in the book, and obviously a lot of the point of view scenes with Sue, who kind of goes through this what sounds like a bit of like a satirical sort of her sexual exploits in Hollywood, and some of the sort of issues she has in sort of like the casting departments and stuff like that gets depicted in the book. And there was some people are like, did the studio try to shoot some of that and ended up just being like, we're going to cut it? It sounds like this movie was found a lot in the edit, which can explain why maybe some of the jankiness you're going to experience, but also by finding this movie in the edit, it's exactly why it has the that sense of unreliability to it, the sense that you are in some sort of psychologically subjective and intense perspective of this character, which is, I think, what makes the movie as special as it is.
Yeah, it seems as if with the editing, it did say that there were more kind of extended dialogue sequences, and I think the ones that they have in here are fantastic and enough. I think with Haskell, it's kind of like you get enough that there's a mystery to him, but there's enough information that once we get a little bit more like the connection to his father and everything, it kind of connects with our lead character so that he can continue what seems to be kind of a lie, even though the way he performs it is sincere, as if he's telling you the truth in his narration. But there is that kind of unreliable narrator aspect of it where things just seem to keep happening to him that are really, really awful, to a point where you're like, how does all of this happen? How is it not?
It has some of my
whatsoever?
favorite voiceover narration of any film. Yeah, honestly,
absolutely, me too. And I feel like if they
obviously a famous staple of noir, right, but this is really good.
And then the one with Vera, where it's like the kind of first time that he gets really challenged, I think is so important for that one to be more of an extended dialogue scene, but for everything else to kind of be a little bit shorter the way it is, so that you're not quite sure if you can trust this guy with the further the journey goes on.
No, you're so right, and I don't think it would work if we had June's point of view, because then we wouldn't be able to sort of distinguish, that sort of unreliability of, because everything we see is his version of the story, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that really. It has that sort of intensely subjective view of how we're seeing things. There's that amazing scene when he calls his girlfriend to say, I'm going to come see you. And we see her, but we never hear her speak. It's such an odd scene. He's talking, and we see her, but she never gets to say anything, which sort of makes you early on start to question everything that you're seeing. And I think that even the famous opening scene where he's at the diner, where he's so difficult, and he's such a he's just sort of drowning in his sorrows, and it becomes so dreamlike instantly with the enormous coffee cup, the sort of perspective where the coffee cup suddenly becomes large, and then
I love that opening scene so much, of seeing Tom Neal here just like covered in dirt and sweat. He's obviously giving an incredibly sort of temperamental and very kind of pouty performance, as kind of Ebert described described it, but he's very sweaty, he's dirty, he's depressed. The opening is him sort of hitchhiking on these shadowy highways, barely sustaining himself on essentially cheap diner coffee, and generally just being an asshole to waitresses and truckers, whoever basically is there. The only kindly sociable guy to him is this guy named Joe, who tries to strike up a conversation and then plays a song on the jukebox, which is "I Can't Believe That You're in Love with Me," and it literally triggers, and it's the moment where you know that what it is that you're watching, because it triggers this disappearing into the sort of memory flashbacks of the events that brought him to the diner, signaling that actually the entire film you're about to watch is technically this flashback deliberately from his perspective, and it makes room for Ulmer to do the things that he really loves to do, which was to be what he learned working in German expressionism, was to exaggerate with your lighting, exaggerate with your framing, like do these things, and it helps to set it up right away that you're going to be in someone's subjective mind, and maybe that's not actually what those places look like or exactly how those conversations went, but they're how they felt to him, and the feeling is, I think, what's more important to the film, especially when you get to the stuff of like I love that push in on Neil's face, and he looks like he's in physical pain hearing the music, and then there's like this strange in-camera lighting setup transition that almost spotlights his eyes before it goes into the giant coffee cup, which turns into the drum of the bandmate, and it's just such a wonky, disorienting kind of but fluid transition. And when the camera pulls out, he's giving you the basic of the basic setup of like, I'm a nightclub, sort of piano player. Here's my lounge singer girlfriend, Sue, played by Claudia Drake. She's an ordinary healthy girl, and I'm an ordinary healthy guy, and together we had an ordinary healthy romance. And I'm like, I believe you, man. I absolutely believe you. And then you get that extended sequence of them like walking through the thickest Casablanca ass fog you've ever seen in your life, and it makes it's New York recreated in like this out of time sound stage that doesn't really, there's like a horse-drawn carriage they walk by, and either way, right away that this is someone's weird fantasy that you're watching.
And I love too, like the fog builds as he's getting the bad news that she's going to go to LA to pursue her dream and leave him behind, so it's almost as if like that mood is physically being formed around him as they continue the talk. And before too, like his attitude of just seemingly believing nothing can go right, it does cause this kind of triggering, explosive kind of attitude that he has, like when he listens to the music. I do like the part where the waiter's yelling at him for having poor taste because he doesn't like the song or whatever, and he kind of apologizes and kind of cowers to that. But he even in his own version of events, he's such an asshole. When that guy tips him and he goes, "This drunk gave me a 10 spot and I couldn't get excited. What was it? A piece of paper crawling with germs," is how he feels about it. Giving him a little bit of the shattered dreams of, part of this too is so it reminds me so much of Lost Highway when I watched it a little bit, the idea of shattered dreams and this guy who wanted to possibly play at Carnegie Hall or something, and now he's playing cheap clubs, and his girlfriend's leaving him to pursue her dreams, and he thinks that she's an idiot for doing that because it didn't work out for him, and that's kind of he comes off like a pity machine, right? Like it's just it feels like there's so much that he's telling the audience about before anything really fully goes wrong that you kind of, I don't know, I think that allows you to not fully believe him right away, because he's just got such a negative attitude about it. He feels like it's self-pitying. It doesn't feel as if he's, appreciating anything around him, including the girl, but before she leaves for LA, it seems like he's been like this for quite some time, and that probably would be a part of why she's making that decision as well. But because we get his narrative, I think he even paints it kind of like, they're in love, but she decided to leave me. And I think it's again, just feeding into that kind of pity party that he seems to be obsessed with himself.
It's drenched in self-pity. And it's even like, you're so right, because he starts by this flashback by saying how great everything was. But like literally 30 seconds later, he's like so like bummed out about everything. Of course she wants to leave, and even when he, calls her because he misses her, the fact that we don't hear her is like, he's so self-absorbed, and he's sort of, he doesn't care what's going on with her. He doesn't want to hear anything. He just he really reveals himself at every turn, which I think is so important for the setup. It's Ulmer telling us to really, in a way that, right around the same time would be a Double Indemnity, which also starts with a voiceover and goes to a flashback where we have to remember who's telling us the story. So I think it's so
there was some quote where Ulmer like jokingly, I think, said that they tried to call it like single indemnity or something like that. Well, yeah, it definitely is like the cheap, like dirty cousin to that movie in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, and even when he calls her to, and you only get his perspective of the dialogue, he's still implying that he's going there to marry her, and then it seems as if he doesn't outright say it, but there's just the way he words things makes you feel like he's trying to just lock her in further, so that even if he moves to LA, he's not really going to let her flourish and become whatever she wants to be.
He sounds a little too honestly kind of stoked that her dreams aren't working out based on what they describe
now
over the phone.
I can come and she misses me because things aren't working out and I can marry her. Yeah, it seems like he's just looking at it from his benefit, and it is
because she basically says, or we don't hear her say it, but from his point of the conversation, we understand that the star-making casting gigs have not worked out, and he's like, well, those executives are just big old idiots, and how about I come to LA and we get married in LA? And
yeah, exactly. It still seems like it's for his benefit, and it sucks too because he's so it does show at least in the beginning quite a bit of his talent, where he is actually absolutely ripping the piano. Like, he's very, very, very good. But you just have that sneaking suspicion that it's been his kind of his attitude towards everything that's probably not made the most professional relationships happen for him.
He has a lot of clear anxiety about the fact that it hasn't made him money, and that he's so financially sort of desperate. I love that monologue he gets early on where he's like, money, you know what that is. It's the stuff you never have enough of. It's the little green things with Washington's picture that men slave over and commit crimes for and die for. And he goes kind of on and on about this, but like he does that as he's doing the montage of like hitchhiking and being like, I'm going to get to LA, and the precarity of the situation he's already in is meant to be kind of set up there, and the idea that thumbing rides is dangerous, and you never know what you're in for when you hear the squeal of the brakes. And he's saying these lines, they have a really like dirty kind of poetry to them, or a hard-boiled poetry to them, essentially, as you are that something is going to kind of go wrong here, and it's just through these sort of atmospheric choices and through this writing of the dialogue he's been given, even if obviously Ulmer is working with actors who are B actors who didn't quite have very strong careers. And there's something about, I know that they got kind of I think both actors honestly didn't get the best reviews when the movie came out, but I've since come around to really liking basically all of the performances in the movie, even Neil, even though you don't really want to like Neil. And you don't necessarily like him actually in the movie, but he has a fucking crazy story we'll get to at some point in this conversation.
For an hour about Tom Neal's personal life. It's hard not to view it through that once you know it. But I do think you're rooting for him on that when he first starts on the road, because like anytime you start to identify with his frustration, and then he finally gets a ride, and you kind of hope it goes well, against.
It kind of seems like it goes well right away, right? Like when it's with Charles Haskell, it's actually the first time in the movie where he kind of lights up a little bit because he enjoys having like kind of a conversation with another man, and he finds out that this guy he seems like he kind of admires this guy a bit because he's a bookie from Arizona who's driving all the way to LA for a horse race, and he describes like having a tussling with the most dangerous animal in the world, woman, and it's something that he's like that's kind of a cool line. And then when he sits down to stop at a diner, he pays for his meal in exchange for him like taking a shift at the wheel and part of their all-night driving so that they get to LA faster. And he sees this guy as, I think, someone who also had a poor background, is a bit of a self-made man, and is kind of living maybe a way that he kind of wishes that he could. And it's the first time you see like Neil's eyes light up in conversation with a guy, and it's just funny that he gives you that just to take that away from him like half a scene later as you get to the death of this character. He's been driving for hours. Haskell is sort of asleep in the passenger seat, seat. It begins to pour rain and needs to put sort of the top down on the convertible. And as he's doing that sort of solo, it's a very beautifully shot sequence. Haskell just limplessly sort of falls out of the passenger seat and his head hits a rock, killing him. Or maybe he was already dead and died from heart failure or sort of meds complication. He brings up that he was taking pills. You don't really know, but it's that moment where he goes, I just was having these almost like sleepy driving fantasies of Sue, and you get that weird, that crazy Dutch angle of her performing with the band silhouetted behind her. He wakes out of his fantasy to be like, oh, the guy in the car next to me is dead, and I sort of look like a poor guy who just killed a guy for his money in his car.
Yeah, that's also some of these techniques that he uses just for the more kind of whether it be something just interesting like the way they fade the map into his hitchhiking and like his walking of his feet or getting into a car. Very cool. And then
it's one of my favorite edited movies like ever, because clearly this movie was discovered in the edit.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the three shadows that are kind of above Sue as she's singing that are like in like playing the horns or whatever, just gives both like she's, you know, the upper angle, so he's looking up at her as well. She looks like much taller, so there's kind of like a respect there, but there's that dreamy aspect that still seems uncanny. So yeah, all that I think is great. And then also him just listening to like it seems like he likes to also listen to Haskell. He's feeding off of him, but I found that he was more intrigued in just listening to the story and gaining some like respect for him. Although the part where he mentions the woman is very much.
That's what I wanted to bring up, because that
and the scars on his hand. Yeah.
You know, I think it's a really smart choice to have Tom Neal. Like he's not, you know, agreeing with him, but it's great that you, like, a woman had to fight you off in the car, that you tried to rape some woman in the car. Mm-hmm. We don't really have a reaction from him, which I think is sort of, he's being strategic. He's not going to say, well, why were you trying to rape me in the car? Because he obviously needs the ride. But we also don't know if he thinks there's anything wrong with that either. You know, so it's this sort of ambiguity that kind of floats there. Like, you know.
And he even starts saying things like it wasn't a draw, or, you know, there'll be scars someday. So that also implies that when he's looking at the scratches that they're decently fresh as well. So there's just all these things that you're like we're not getting enough detail basically, but he's also set it up where he's seen this other side of him, like you said, Josh, where he does have this respect for him because he's his own individual man that just does what he wants and lives free and all that. So it's very complicated.
He literally has what he doesn't. He has a car to get to LA, right? Like there's something about because there so much of this movie, what it feels like is you're living in a sort of recalled memory that he's kind of doing so in a dreamlike way, but you're so thoroughly planted in like this disturbed mind, like trying to cope with the sort of material reality and kind of conditions of what his life actually is. And so here's a guy who's found a way to like conquer those things, and it seems like he kind of goes, oh, what's the easy route for me doing that? Well, I don't know. I guess instead of going to the police or running, because he sees that he's like, it'll probably look like I'm a poor vagrant who killed a rich guy for his car and his money. So instead he goes, I guess I'll dump the body in the like brush, steal his car, money, clothes, and identity. And he's doing it in a way where he's like talking himself through the crime, but addressing what sounds like us, what sounds like an audience, or sounds like someone he's speaking to. Because it's a lot of like, look, I know how this looks. I bet you even don't believe me, but I did not intend to rob him. This is just how I became a thieving murderer traveling across America. And I think it's such an incredible decision in terms of the voiceover and also in the editing, because it leaves Ulmer open to basically formally constructing this like a series of, you know, sort of self-pitying, guilt-ridden excuses that this guy is making as to the decisions that he made, even though you kind of go, I feel like you could have just told the truth to somebody, or you didn't need to necessarily like steal his car and steal his identity and go on the road. And it's he jumps to these decisions with a lot of ease that he tries to explain you through and tries to beg you to sympathize with.
Yeah, and it's like it comes from this almost like he's a anxiety prone overthinker or something like that. But it does more so come off eventually. The more he says things, I think, the more you start to disbelieve him. Like
he's
it's like
protesting too much, right?
Yeah, totally. He has that line where, like, at first, you know, he drops the body when he opens the door and it hits him on the head, and you're like, that is incredibly unlucky, but you know, maybe that could happen. And then once he starts to do the money line where he's like, well, I mean, it's not like he was going to use the money, so of course I will take the money. And
I love that line where he's like, look, I intended just to throw his body in the dirt. I didn't intend when I was doing that I was going to take his clothes and take his wallet.
Yeah, and his car and his identity and everything else. Yeah, it's like
it just happened.
Yeah, it was
happened,
crazy.
Man.
It just happened. It's like it's just too far. One too many things.
Just don't make sense with the version he's telling. Like, I think that's the sort of disconnect between what he's telling us and what's happening don't fit, right? And even that, I think that Tom Neal does a brilliant job with that voiceover, because it almost gets hysterical at points, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He sort of loses control of his tone and his voice. And because I think, you know, in many ways he treats Charlie, the guy who picks him up, as a con artist would treat a Mark. He's very careful what he says. He's timing everything perfectly, and so none of it quite are we sure to believe. And then, you know, when he picks up his hitchhiker, that makes no sense. You're driving a stolen man's car with all his money in it, and you're going to pick up a hitchhiker. So the choices don't make sense with the story he's telling, which is one of the many things that makes it so brilliant.
Yeah, and it does feel at a certain point, like, let's say even if he's not just a lying killer, it does feel like at a certain point that he's just kind of, through his attitude that we see in the beginning especially, that he's like just manifesting his own doom. Like it's just gonna happen regardless.
Yeah, you're just the unluckiest man alive who just keeps finding, he's like, feels like he gets out of one noose and it's straight into another one or something. Like, it feels like this whole thing, it's almost, it would be farce if it wasn't so haunting.
Yeah, totally.
To watch, right?
That is kind of interesting that it does feel like a character that 9 times out of 10, if it was written this way, I would be feeling like this is a little much. But again, I think it's that, like, the mystery, some of the lack of the other pieces they want to put in here just makes you fill in the spaces yourself. And again, this performance and the unreliable narrator, just, I think it works so well. It just killed.
Yeah, friend of the pod, Will Sloan, made an incredibly accurate comparison in his review where he said that, you know, it and I think it's because it was such inspiration on the film, but the performance reminds him of Bill Pullman in Lost Highway, because it is like so clearly like this guy experiencing this sort of dreamy, guilt-ridden, almost sort of confession, but also self-deception, and he's trying to cope or make sense of the fact that he did something horrible. And he's like, but here is the version of events where it makes sense that I did that. Like, you have to see in it, and it fits the mold of fiction and crime fiction that you've seen before. And this is what would lead to someone having to do this out of desperation. I didn't mean to do any of this. And it's such a similar sort of existential crisis that this character is going through that I think Pullman is going through, and also the performances I think have a similarly kind of awkwardness and kind of.
And they both project all of their darkness onto a woman who then carry that darkness. And like, there's 2 ways to read Vera, the Ann Savage character who comes in next. And there's a way that he's presenting her, and there's a completely different read on the story. So I think that's something that Lost Highway, of course, dives deep into, the symbol of the femme fatale versus the real woman who's been sexually assaulted and is just trying to survive now that she's in the car with another criminal. And so I think
she is incredible.
I think
she is absolutely incredible.
She's such a welcome presence too, because she's like the first one that's calling him out on his bullshit. And it's just you honestly, by this point, you kind of want to eat it up. So I love just all the berating that she does to him. It's awesome.
It's nice to have such a passive, self-pitying character just like meet. It's a immovable object, sort of unstoppable force kind of moment where she's just so snappy and so like snarly about everything that she says to him, and she gets to deliver some of the best hard-boiled dialogue in the entire movie, where she's just like, "You're a cheap crook, and I don't like you," and she's telling him to shut up. And she, one of her best ones, "What did you do? Kiss him with a wrench?" And she has so many fantastic lines. And I do love that it's a totally self-imposed issue, as you pointed out, Megan. Like straight up, he just says, "Well, there's a beautiful woman on the side of the road. I guess as a man in a noir movie, I'm supposed to say get in the car," even though it's the stupidest decision you could possibly make, because he doesn't know that it was the woman that Haskell literally tried to assault and is the one who gave the scratch marks and all of that. But at the same time, how were you going to have enough believable information to pass yourself off as this guy? And I love how long she passively sits in the car letting him play out his performance before going, "I know that you're not this guy." You're like, I know the clothes, I know the car, I know what this guy did to me. You clearly stole his identity and probably killed this guy.
Yeah, I think that's a hint too. It's like she waits to see just how full of shit he is. Like, how long does he? Maybe he'll tell her at one point. No, it's just like he is playing this character.
Will this guy hang himself by talking too much, like he does in the whole movie?
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Also, I forgot about this detail, but right before this, which is really cool, is when he's getting ready as Haskell, basically, like just taking his clothes. He's showered for the first time, so he actually looks kind of like presentable. And he reads the man's like papers in the briefcase and find out that he was more of just like a big talker and was kind of trying to sell to his dad. He was like on his way to the father that he left 15 years ago or something like that. And there was just more. Again, there's just lying happening. Like these people are presenting themselves as something that they're not.
Yeah, no one can be trusted. That the scene in the car, just as you were saying, when she's just sort of seems to be sleeping in the car, and then we see her eye open before Neil does, and then she moves straight out of. I mean, a million horror movies have copied that moment where she starts to sit up and turns to him and lets both barrels fire at him. And it's really one of the most terrifying images I've ever seen in a movie, because she just does it from that point. The minute she starts talking to him, she does not stop until she parts the movie. It's just like completely on fire. I had read that she had a history with Tom Neal working on one of the movies, and he was always making passes at her, and she hated him. And I like that. She loved to use this as an opportunity to completely tear him.
Put him in his place
for like 10 full minutes. That's amazing. That makes that scene even better now. Exactly. I also love her, like, again, kind of just on there's the mysterious aspect of it, but there's also this idea of like just constantly moving forward where he asks where she's from, and then she just goes, "I'm from back there." Yeah. And it's just kind of like, it's the past. It doesn't matter. I'm moving forward. And that's kind of where eventually he even ends up as a character in a way, just kind of like not knowing where, but just moving on.
Well, also, same thing. That line where he goes, "Where are you going?" And she says, "Where are you going?"
Yeah. Totally.
And she's just like, I've never had a hitchhiker ask me where I'm going. That's a weird one, you know?
And also just some of this great noir dialogue where he's just like, "My goose was cooked." I just love that. Yeah, that's silly and awesome. And just good stuff.
One of my favorite ones that she does is when she very aggressively goes, "If you act wise, you'll pop into jail so fast, it'll give you the bends. As crooked as you look, I'd hate to see a fella as young as you wind up sniffing that perfume that Arizona hands out to free murderers." That's such a mouthful. And the venomous way she says this stuff is like, that she would absolutely stab this guy in the throat if she thought that it was the right, it would benefit her. But for now, she's like, actually, I have information to blackmail this guy. I have power over this guy, and this power dynamic could be useful for me for the time being. So I'm going to play this out.
So much smarter than he is about not getting getting caught, about using this to your advantage, about what they should do with their car. She really takes over. And I had read too that Ulmer told her to say everything as fast as she could, and she is like a machine gun with those lines too. So she's sort of so sleepy and so like slow on the uptake, and she's just like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah,
she injects this kind of life into it. This sort of doomy movie, which is so thrilling.
Yeah, she's so like, that's the thing too, watching her be so like focused and fierce and smart, and then him just kind of not even be able to speak a word really. He's just kind of like dumbfounded the entire time that she's berating him. There's even a line where she outright just says, "I don't like you," and it's just that blatant just line is amazing.
He does start to bite back a little bit. It's sort of funny once they get to LA. When they pull down the Murphy bed, and she said, "You figured that out pretty fast or something," and he said, "I invented it," in this deadpan, they do have chemistry of a kind, you have to admit.
Yeah, I mean, it is like when they go to LA and they go to this motel room, which is funny because the motel room basically becomes sort of like the second set of the movie. It's like there's the diner, there's the motel room, I guess you could say there's sort of the club in the beginning, and then there's the very clearly fake foggy New York streets, and then there's what I think is like B-roll of highway stuff that they then did rear projection on in order to make it work. So there's a ton of stuff that makes this so cheap in a kind of cool sort of uncanny way. And when they get to this sort of motel room, you realize you quickly realize that most of the movie is going to be these two bickering in a hotel room for most of it, and so it's so important that they're sort of equally annoyed, equally hostile kind of rom-com chemistry works, because that is a huge part of her being like, he makes him get the hotel room, then takes a bath and sort of offers him a drink, and is trying to kind of get him to sort of, I think, enjoy the situation that he's in, or at least try to be, accept it and be like, go with it, like make it, we could have fun together as this sort of crime spree duo of some kind. But he feels like this completely sort of emasculated prisoner, and he's so resentful of that, and he's so grumpy about it that it's not going to happen for them. Even though, you do understand, because it's one of those things where, she does have a power over him, and based on his version of events that he's telling, he didn't kill the guy. So he's, he does feel sort of like a Hitchcock sort of wrongfully accused man in a way, and going through that kind of torment. But at the same time, he's just such an asshole at times. They hear a little bit like, I don't know, she should be able to say whatever she wants to you, because because at this point you don't believe him anymore too. Like there's just so much that's happened that it feels kind of like, again, I feel like she's just a character that he's needed in a way where she's just slapping him around and being like, wake the fuck up, idiot. She's a character in similar financial circumstances to him who has found a way that works, and he won't. He throws a pity party for himself, as we've been saying this entire time. And like, she has that fantastic line where she explains her philosophy, and she just goes, life's like a ball game. You got to take a swing at whatever comes along before you find it. You find it's the ninth inning. And and the fact that he just immediately dismisses, like, of course it is something that you'd read on like a fucking fortune cookie or something, and he does go, I bet you read that somewhere, and he shoots her down. But what she's saying would actually help him probably live his life better. And she describes him as just constantly in a sense of like belly aching about the world and trying to buck fate and all this stuff. And she is right when she tells him that stuff, even though you are going, yeah, she's also an exaggerated criminal femme fatale sort of character who you don't know how much you can trust her either. Right. Yeah. And I do like too that once she like starts to get onto that idea of going to the father for money, it almost feels like, again, he's being forced to play like the ghost of the man that he killed, or whatever happened. It's just like, he's in his suit, and now they're on the road to actually deal with it. Seemingly what Haskell was doing. You reminded me of that other location, the used car dealership. Oh yeah. That's right. Yep. That is the squalor of this and the shoddiness of this movie, which is something I've just come to absolutely love about it. It's such an unglamorous noir. It's such an ugly noir.
Yeah, they actually shot it outside, which you wouldn't do in a studio film. That would be on the set. So I guess some of that stuff makes it feel more real because it's so, they're not dressing that. They're out there in the elements, and, they had, Anne Savage had cold cream in her hair, so she looks so dirty. Like everything is, you do feel like you want to take a bath after this movie for sure. I mean, and that hotel room that you do, it always feels like they're in there forever. It's not that much of the movie. It's a short movie, but you do feel trapped. Like they're at the terminus. I mean, it's a big thing in noir that LA, California is the end, right? You've gone as far as you can go. And so there's sort of that trapped feeling, I think is so successful.
Yep.
Yeah, and the way it uses just the two rooms too, that it's like a sort of living room area and it's a bedroom, and she gets access to the bedroom and the bathroom in a way that like he can't, and she's kind of delineated these two spaces, and the way the camera even just like does something like, it's focused on her having just gotten out of the bath and on the couch and feeling comfortable and trying to get him involved, and him just refusing and being a grumpy Gus about the entire thing, and until he realizes that she kind of has a bit of a drinking problem, and you get that crazy push in on like the big bottle of like bourbon or whiskey, and then you get the sort of dissolve into it being empty, that he has been kind of pushing her to drink and drink and drink. And it's something that becomes really important. Like this movie's really actually good in the edit of setting these moments up, of setting up, the scratches on his arm to be like, he's going to pick up a girl who did it to him, or he's going to realize that she has a drinking problem and he can get even more drunk. And it just makes them both even more angry and vindictive and want to shout at each other and disagree with each other. But it leads to that incredible sequence where he gets her so drunk and so angry that she grabs that rotary phone and she runs into the bedroom with it, and accidentally, she's so drunk she is stumbling around doing it, wraps the cord around her neck seemingly by accident while doing so, and when she slams the door and locks the door, he goes, she's gonna call the cops on me. So he starts pulling on that wire, and we don't see it, it's all shot from his point of view, but he is pulling on that wire. There's a lot of tension, and when he bashes his way through that door, he realizes that he was strangling her to death the entire time. And it's one of those things where you go, this is a crazy lie that you would make up like at the police station, like about how it happened.
And it is in the book. He does kill her on purpose, so it makes the unreliable narrator thing seem even more fascinating, because he does seem to be setting up to kill her, right? He's going to get her drunk and kill her. So to the point of supporting the unreliable narrator argument, it's interesting that maybe we are seeing the lie he told, but if we had, but we know the truth, because it's like, how could all these circumstances keep conspiring against him? How could anyone die this crazy way, and really, I mean, I remember the first time I saw this movie, I couldn't believe that murder scene. It is one of the, it is like, you can't believe it's happening, right? It's so
and how long it is when he walks in there, and the build up to her corpse, just like in the mirror in the background. Like there's not a single frame that they shoot where she's not like somewhere in the background of it. Like he can't look away from it. And, and the fact that he immediately goes, well, no one would probably believe me here either, so I guess I better start the cover-up process on this one. And you're just like, man, like what a scene.
At that point, I'm like, dude, you are just a coping narcissist psychopath at this point. I don't know what to tell you. And also, just even as he's painting like this story that he's telling the police or whoever he's telling it to, the audience, whoever he's trying to make believe this happened, is he's still playing the victim. Like the reason that he's angry with her, physical with her, is because she's going to call the police and ruin it for both of them, and that's going to get them both in trouble, and both canned or whatever. And it's and it still feels like he's constantly trying to paint even the most violent act that he does in this movie as something that he just had to do.
She forced on him because she is someone who was completely fatalistic and was like, I'm going to see the rope at some point. Like, I don't care, like, when I see it. And the fact that it also happens on the phone, that he tries to call Sue on earlier in the film and doesn't speak to her, and it's the same, like, it's the same object that he uses to kill her. Like, there's just so many details that build up in this coincidence filled sort of like dream component to it.
And yeah, to the point where it has to be purposeful on the, you know, the director's part and everything. And the also just even the blatant ones, like when she's saying like, you're hurting me, right before she runs into the room. And also this one's just kind of like a logistics thing, but if you really wanted to just destroy the phone, he probably could have just pulled it out of the hook in the wall and not, you know,
he didn't think about that one.
No, he didn't think about that. So that's a dumb thing, but I just thought it was kind of funny. But
no, that's why it just feels like, well, it was a crazy series of circumstances that led to me strangling this woman to death, that it's incredibly convenient for me to strangle to death. And that's what's like so horrifying about it. And I don't want to keep saying it over and over again, but it's again what really makes me think that like David Lynch had to have mainlined this alongside Kiss Me Deadly when he was doing Lost Highway, because it is sort of the same moment there. And the fact that when we covered Lost Highway, we talked about too that movie has such a weird true crime connection with the obviously the stuff with Robert Blake, and the fact that I watched this one, and I actually had not researched Tom Neal before doing this episode, or before like having watched the movie before, and so for this episode it was the first time I looked into that, and I was like, this guy did 6 years in prison for manslaughter of his wife that he claimed was an accident. And I was like, wild. He did exactly what his character did. It's crazy.
He's on the couch. He said they were struggled over the gun. She wanted a divorce. He said she was cheating on him. And he shot her with there's pictures of it, not of her body, but it's so haunting to see because it feels like such a replica of this. And he had already gotten in trouble for, I don't know if you've done any Barbara Payton movies, but he had.
I don't know if we have actually.
So she wrote what I consider the great noir memoir about her life, but she was engaged to Frances Chateau, the actor, and she was. They broke up. She started getting involved with Tom Neal. So the two of them, the two men, Frances Chateau and Tom Neal, had a public fist fight over her, in which Tom Neal so beat the crap out of Frances Chateau that he had to be hospitalized, and it completely screwed up his face. So he was sort of blackballed after that because it was such a public spectacle, and he just had obviously a temper issue. I was
gonna say, no wonder Tom Neal's so perfect for this character. He is this guy.
Yeah. So Barbara Payton, it's a great memoir. But she really was really into Tom Neal, so it tells you a lot about Barbara Payton. But they did tour Postman Always Rings Twice as a play together with them playing the leads, which is another connection. Yeah, so Tom Neal, his history definitely haunts the movie.
Wow, yeah, I didn't even know about that actually. I didn't look that up. That's pretty incredible stuff in the most haunting way possible.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely sits with you when you watch this particular sequence, and his reaction to it, and just the way that he looks at her sort of lifeless body with the cord around her, even in the background of the frame when he's trying to leave, and how much he's going to be, taking this with him as it returns back to the opening with this, him sweaty and dirty and at the diner from the beginning. And he basically says that, look, I didn't go and find Sue because, as far as I could tell, what I just did made that impossible. Al Roberts was dead and he had to stay dead. And he does talk about the sort of, this ironic aspect of like the papers wrote about it, and they're saying that they're looking for Haskell in suspicion of killing Vera. Right. So he's like, he actually did sort of find an alibi where the two people who he killed in some capacity have been kind of pushed together in the story. And the ending of the film, which, from what I understand, again, was discovered in the edit because the producers made them shoot an ending where he gets arrested because it was the Code era, and you always had to shoot you had to have the bad guys needed to be arrested and morality needed to win out the day. And so they technically do that. They technically end the movie with him getting arrested, but there's an incredible incredible detail that his voiceover makes it clear that it's this kind of fantasy or this dream of, or this anxiety, this nightmare, I guess you could say, of this is what he imagined is going to happen to him, but it hasn't happened yet. The cops picking him up. So the fact that it was shot as a literal ending that met production code standards, and they found a way through the implication to make it seem like this anxious, doomed sort of imagination is really, really cool.
It's amazing smuggling because it's like how dumb are the production code people that they didn't realize you couldn't.
Because instead he's like, I'm gonna live the rest of my days waiting for this cop car to come over and put me in it and take me away for the rest of my life. You know,
it does make you feel like the voiceover. It's almost like you're at a bar late at night and the drunk guy next to you wants to tell you his story, and that this is the story, and he's trying to tell you where things went wrong, and you got to believe him. You know that.
Also, and at the end too, I can't remember the exact line, but he does imply like there's almost a like whether it be fate or some type of mysterious force that will kind of collide us together, still not taking responsibility for what he did, which I just found to be a funny little detail.
He was like, it was a weird series of tragic accidents. It's all it was.
I couldn't help it, man. It just happened.
24 hours, you accidentally kill 2 people.
It's like that's just the way she goes sometimes. Oh man.
But maybe pivoting towards a reductive rating around this one, which for you, Megan, is maybe remove all the words and all the nuance and reduce the movie to a number between 1 and 5, but it's also become sort of final statements or any final lines or any scenes or anything we happen to miss along the way. But for me, this is an incredibly easy 5. It was a 5 the first time I saw it. I've seen it 3 or 4 times at this point. And every single time I just find it even more impactful, and I feel like I'm getting more out of it, despite the fact that it was made on such a bare bones budget and is clearly, has such little resource like at its disposal, and just through the writing and through the use of framing and through editing and all of this, it ends up a much more complicated movie than I think it is, especially when you watch it for the first time, because it has such a history, or it's such a staple in noir that you kind of go back to it and you're like, oh, that's a relatively simple like pulp plot. It's like a guy just, a dirtbag guy gets into a series of shitty scenarios and tries to get out of them. Like, I could see someone watching it for the first time and like being a little underwhelmed by it. But as soon as I think you're keyed in to all the little subtle clues that this is definitely like you're meant to be doubting the story he's telling you, and that you're technically watching either what is the drunken ramblings of a guy begging you to listen to his story and understand his perspective on killing 2 people, or you're listening to you're in the like weird fever dream of a guy who's trying to cope with that and trying to excuse it. And the fact that Ulmer is just so good at formally rendering that perspective and making a film that feels equally sweaty and guilt-ridden and unreliable and nihilistic and just fatalistic and so seedy and gross and hazy and every word that you can possibly think of that you associate with the noir genre, it's in here for a reason. There's a reason this is such a seminal one for filmmakers, and I feel like I've just latched onto that more and more each time. The fact that this really just is, like at most half honest retelling of really, really violent circumstances, and this guy just trying to make sense of it. And I like Neil's performance. I think he has a lot of shit that deep inside of him that was maybe gotten out of this, and they maybe should have seen them and maybe stopped him before they got out into the real world. But I think he really works for the film. I think Anne Savage is absolutely fantastic, and she chose the perfect stage name for herself with what Ulmer asked her to do on screen for her here, because she's savage, she's crazy. I love this movie, and I'm gonna watch it for many years to come, I think.
Me too. This is a 5. The last time it is an upgrade for me too, which is always exciting. So I think the whole idea of him being the unreliable narrator, and whether or not he be kind of just he's manifesting his doom through this kind of like pity that he has for himself, and this unbelievably ungrateful attitude no matter what is going on in his life, or he's just a killer. I think it's definitely leaning towards killer, but it just, I think either way kind of works, and it has this really dark, guilt-ridden kind of journey, and I really take to it. I think Anne Savage berating him is incredible. She's so sharp and focused when she's doing it. They're just the amount of dialogue that they give her, especially in that car scene, is so fun. Really great, like, expressionist moments, like the lighting on his guilty, exhausted eyes in the diner before he starts telling the story is incredible stuff. Investigate Tom Neal for sure, but he is perfect.
No, he's been investigated and convicted. He was fine.
Oh, he was convicted. I didn't. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how many years, but he served many years in prison for the what was argued down to manslaughter, I think.
Oh, but
he did claim, yeah, that it was an accidental killing, and so he basically had to do exactly what he does in this movie in front of a court somewhere in his real life, which is crazy.
Gotcha. Yeah, hopefully not just totally drunk.
I just pulled on the phone cord.
Yeah, for real. But anyway, he is, I will say, perfect for the role. I mean, the guilt that just comes off from his character onto the screen is pretty unbelievable. He just looks so exhausted and filthy the entire time. Honestly, he even looks exhausted when he does get the shower and starts to channel Haskell. Like, I think he's very good. And it was interesting too, just on the hitchhiking thing. There's a line where they say, like, you don't want to trust people these days. And I just found that interesting because it's kind of like when you hear nowadays about people hitchhiking, that's what they say. And this is 80 years ago. So it's really just no one trusted anybody at any time, it seems. But I just thought that was funny. But yeah, so 5 out of 5. This thing is an absolute masterpiece, I think.
Yeah, for you, Megan.
Yes, 5 out of 5. Everything you both said is so right. I mean, I think the first time I saw that I was very young, and I really liked it, but it definitely at that time wasn't picking up on these elements we were talking about in terms of the unreliable narrator, this is stuff that really, it's a movie that seems so simple, but the more you watch it, it just keeps revealing itself. It just, there's new layers, moments shimmer forth, and there's new ways to look at it, and you start to really appreciate Ulmer's genius about how much he's doing with so little, and how he actually uses it to the advantage. Somehow everything feels more vivid, more real, more intense, because there's no distractions. Everything is bare bones. Everything is pure technique. And I think that's also is the opportunity to let those two performances just dominate. I mean, they both just feel like they're living this. And there's just something, it's an almost unbearably uncomfortable movie in many ways, which is like quite a feat. You do feel like you're witnessing something. I think the little few times I've heard Lynch talk about it, he talks about it like that, like you're actually witnessing something real. And that sort of gives it this sort of frightening quality that makes it linger with you after. And there's something about the panicked hitch in Tom Neal's voice at the end, those last few lines, how high it gets, this sort of hysteria. I think that's what you're left with is just like there is no safety at the end. You feel like you're still in it somehow, which is just incredible.
Yep.
Yeah, and anything that like whether it's an intentional creative choice or it was a budgetary limitation, that matters less to me than I think what Ulmer achieved with Under the Shoddy Unglamorous. Like it has a desperate look to it. It feels so brutal and miserable, and just how psychologically intense this ends up capturing this sad sack like noir protagonist, like compartmentalizing his own ugly behavior is like so ahead of its time and so influential. So yeah, I impressed with this every single time I watch it. But I think that is going to wrap it up for Detour here. We're going to be right back. You're going to want to stick around because we're going to be talking about a lesser known horror noir, more film here. We're going to be talking about The Seventh Victim.
Blood around him.
Your sister, Mary, is a murderess.
I don't believe it.
You go back to school, then forget Jocelyn.
Drink it, Jacqueline. There's nothing else for you to do. They say you've got to die.
All right, we are back and we are talking The Seventh Victim, the 1943 mystery horror noir directed by Mark Robson, written by Charles O'Neill and DeWitt Bodine, and starring Kim Hunter, Tom Conway, Gene Brooks, and Hugh Beaumont. Kim Hunter playing a boarding school student named Mary who travels to New York to find her missing sister, and instead finds herself on the path of some pagan cult horror that we will get into. But this is our first time talking about Canadian director, actually, Mark Robson, who's a fairly commercially successful director of Hollywood dramas and romances and even disaster films. His biggest claims to fame probably being the 1967 showbiz melodrama Valley of the Dolls and the 1956 boxing drama Harder They Fall. But he also did the movie Earthquake, for fans of Earthquake. But before he was a Hollywood director, he got his career started as an editor working under the legendary Robert Wise, working on both Citizen Kane and Magnificent Ambersons as one of the in-house editors for RKO Pictures, the latter of which, once again, like a lot of Val Lewton movies, they reused sets for this film. But that was how he was discovered by RKO's sort of horror B-movie producer and maestro Val Lewton, who we have talked about a number of times on this show, especially his collaborations with Jacques Turner on things like Cat People and I Walked with a Zombie, I think was the last episode we did. And we really sort of dove deep into those two being tasked by RKO with, again, the connections here, commercially competing against Universal's iconic monsters, like Frankenstein, on minuscule Poverty Row budgets. And similarly to Ulmer, I think managing to turn those limitations into some of the most beautiful and haunting, like B-horror psychodramas of their era, like really setting a standard, I think, for 1940s Gothic horror suspense and melodrama, and, you know, how to emphasize, I think, through pure mood and visual suggestion rather than any sort of, you know, effects work that they basically couldn't afford. And Lewton frequently being the one to sort of lend the films this kind of sophisticated, sometimes Freudian kind of art horror pulp movie kind of concept. And DeWitt Bodine was the one who was the, you know, sort of credited writer who helped them put them on the page. Although from what a lot of people discuss, basically Val Lewton wrote and directed half the films that he worked on, just in the sense that there was so much detail in the writing that he was like, no, this is how you're going to direct this scene, like in the script. And which is, then finding a director,
right? Like that doesn't happen almost ever, I thought, in some sense.
It's more heard of with producers, and Val Lewton was also a producer, so it makes a little bit of sense. But he still obviously had to find directors who could then really actually give that extra leap in sort of expressionistic style and that dreaminess and the visual use of shadows and architecture and all that kind of stuff. And he found an incredible collaborator, obviously, in Turner, and he was the one actually offered this film first before, I don't know what he dropped out to go and make instead, but Robson made the most sense, I think, to graduate to director because he had been such a strong part of the team who put those films together. And obviously Nicholas Musuraka, who was the cinematographer here, also shot Cat People. Mark Robson edited Cat People, and he literally helped assemble the famous like shadowy stalking pool sequence, and also with I Walked with a Zombie, the sort of dreamy fantasy stuff in that.
And the pacing of those films are fantastic too, with the use of that, like just that.
Oh my God. How many times a character is just like wandering around a decaying property or like this Gothic architecture or something like that. And, you know, I mean, I think about I Walked with a Zombie too. That lyrical cut that I didn't even realize was him was the piercing of that doll, that match cuts with the arrow sticking out of the Saint Sebastian statue. So like this was a guy who understood the project and had been around with it from the beginning and had helped quasi-invent the idea of the sort of like stalking and sudden sound design jump scare sort of editing patterns. And he made a lot of sense, I think, to take on Seventh Victim when they were like, we can't get this guy. So Robson's, you see what you can do with it.
They even say like you see some like early kind of horror elements with the fake outs too, like the use of shadows, and then, you know, she'll turn a corner, it'll be a couple making out, but it looked like as if someone was lifting an object or something to hurt her or something along those lines. And there is some cool like expressionist stuff with audio as well. Like when we'll get to the details, of course, but the lead leaves the school to go on to the unsolved or solve the mystery. There are these kind of like thoughts that are going out throughout her head that she's thinking about as it's going on. That is completely inner monologue, but it just kind of has this, I don't know, idea that she's leaving something in a way. So there are some moments here. I don't know if he quite gets to Turner, but I do think that Robson definitely has some skills.
Yeah, I was so impressed, and I do think it's like you feel like they're in the same cinematic universe. You have two of the same actors from Cat People. One of them playing the same character he plays in.
That confused me. He dies in Cat People.
Yeah, so presumably this is a prequel. But
Yes.
but I love that idea that they all operate in the same universe, and I think it's so. I know Luton has a heavy hand in it, but I think Mark Robson does a great job here with it is such an intensely spooky movie from the very first scene. You are so there's this feeling of paranoia, like right from the jump, that kind of feeling of an enclosed universe, which you get in Cat People and all the Turner movies as well.
Yeah, and even I mean to end, like, to start your movie with a sonnet about death approaching, essentially, it's kind of like really wild. And then even having the zoom out where you have the empty hallway of the church/school that they're in, and then the bell rings and everyone kind of takes, like, it comes into frame. There's something about just
which is the staircase from Orson Welles' Magnificent Ambersons, by the way. That is the scene in this where they stole it.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, and it's smooth camera work too. Like when you have the empty hallway, they come into the frame, and then it starts to kind of like curve over to pan over to introduce Mary, who will be our star. And it's
Kim Hunter, by the way, A Matter of Life and Death, A Streetcar Named Desire, Planet of the Apes, debut role before getting all those crazy roles.
Oh, awesome. I think she's really good in this too. Like she has that, she's got that kind of thing where even characters kind of call her on it, in a sense where she is young, but she has this very focused drive to finding out what happened to her sister. And she doesn't kind of take any of that bullshit. She's very much like, I may be young, but you need to take me seriously. Yeah, I think she's got a very strong performance.
And this is sort of the death, to have the death element right there in the epigraph. You probably talked about this in your previous Luton episode, but his motto, "Death is good." Did you talk about that? How he told?
Yeah, I think we mentioned that. Yeah,
I think this is. They're like, "Don't put any messages in your movie." He said, "Here's my message: death is good." And I think that he's like, obviously, it's sort of opening with that John Donne quote is like immediately like he's thumbing his nose at those executives and just diving right in, because
this definitely is for me. I mean, I guess you could kind of say, Cat People has that component too, where it has a there's a tragedy and a loneliness and a psychosexual kind of component to that, but like the end goal of that is this sort of subconscious desire for death is something that it really feels like plays out with that character. And for in that film there's more subtext, I guess, regarding sort of sexuality and nationality and kind of gender and marriage and the sort of general treatment of sort of like the other and how that kind of character feels and the sort of emotional torment she goes through, which, by the way, colored, unfortunately, my perspective on the Tom Conway psychotherapist character, because I remembered his behavior from that film and I was like, you're a shitty dude. you got eaten because you were trying to have sexual relations with your patient.
He's still suspect in this one. I don't trust him. I think I probably carried that too, because I don't believe.
I know, but it's funny because I don't know that this character in this film necessarily behaves in any way that warrants that, but it did prequel, because I was like,
he didn't quite turn yet. He didn't quite turn yet.
Because I think by the end there's even a moment where he kind of gets the like, fuck you, Satanist, like kind of like line, and he's like, he's a good guy, But I spent the whole movie wondering when it was going to be revealed that like he's a Satanist and involved with it because of just his character from It never.
I would have given Conway's like performance, the way that he, and I don't know if he does this in every film because I've only seen a few with him in it, but the way that he speaks is very I don't know. It's like, I don't know how to explain it. There's probably a term for it. Maybe is it like the transatlantic accent in some way?
Yeah, the mid-Atlantic accent, right? Where it's like vaguely British edged, yeah,
he really pushes into it. So if there was a scene with him going just all out Satanist, it would have worked really well. Yes. But instead, we still do get the Lord's Prayer scene, and I think he delivers that. I do
think that's sort of part of the structure, much like many movies later, like Giallo movies and De Palma movies, where every man seems suspicious. Like the men surrounding the woman and then the sister, the missing woman and the sister, they all seem, at a certain point you suspect all of them. And I do think that's part of the structure of it, right? Like, who among these men should she trust? And I think that's sort of part of where you feel so like you do not know where to land. You don't know who, you feel so unsettled from the very beginning, from the scene when she leaves school, because you don't know why she's on her way out after finding out her sister's missing, and a classmate approaches her on the stairway and says, "Get out and don't ever come back."
Yeah.
Why? Wait,
well, she gets a very interesting line that I think sort of runs parallel to the idea that death is good, which I will say, of any of his movies that convey that idea, this is definitely the most, I don't know what I wanted, the most convincing, or the most compelling viable
argument for death.
Yeah, the most compelling argument is a good way of putting it. But the opening line, in contrast to the ending of the film, is one must have courage to really live in this world. And I think that's the more that's good. More rose-colored way of sort of looking at what you're about to see, because they are telling her, look, you are secluded in this religious boarding school for girls, and unfortunately, look, your sister hasn't paid your tuition in 6 to 9 months or whatever it is. So, I guess we could offer you a job here to work here, but you can't go to school here anymore. And she goes, okay, well, sorry, thanks for the job offer. I'm going to go to New York and find out why my sister's not paying my tuition. And she's told, look, the girl kind of sets her up that, I left and came back and I kind of regret doing that. And some of the relationships between the way women talk to each other in this film is different than the way that they talk to the men in this film. And there is something like, you might see scary things out there, but I promise you don't want to be trapped back here, is kind of what it feels like she's telling her. Even though the rest of the movie kind of argues maybe the school is fine and safe and not
it does feel like happens. Things just get, it's almost like everything's bad. You just need to find the place that it's the least terrible.
The women aren't to be trusted in this movie either.
Not either. Yeah, but the first person she speaks to is Mrs. Hetty, played by Mary Newton, who is the woman who runs this sort of cosmetics company called Saw Jessie or whatever, that her sister used to own but sold to her, and runs into, at the same time, one of her closest friends, a sort of longtime employee, Frances, played by Isabel Jewell, who says that she saw her sister just a week ago in an Italian restaurant in Greenwich Village called Dante, and so she's like, okay, I guess I'll look into that. There is a sort of almost murder mystery procedural component to this at times, but she goes to the restaurant and she ends up speaking to the sort of kind elderly husband and wife restaurant owners, Mr. and Mrs. Romari. And she discovers that her sister sort of one day pulled up to the restaurant in her furs, accompanied by this handsome man and a chauffeur, mysterious men, rented a room from them and never moved into the room, and just visited it sort of a handful of times. And so they agree to open it for her. And it's maybe the most striking, moody image of the movie that kind of sets up the tone of, I think, what she's uncovering, is that when they open that door, and the shot is really, really well done. They open it, they get the shot of their reaction faces, they get this sort of tilted camera perspective of them looking at what is one solitary wooden chair, and then the camera tilts upward, and there's a strung up noose ready for someone to commit suicide with. There's the only two objects in this apartment that she rented, and the cut from their faces looking down to the point of view, and just what a hook for the mystery of what's about to happen, because you're like, oh, we're just talking to people at places like a crime film, and then you're like, what the hell is this? This is nightmarish.
I have to say, I saw this in the theater last year at the Museum of Moving Image, and I don't think anyone in the theater had seen it but me. It was a very young audience too, and they were sort of having fun with it. Maybe this is a little cheesy, we're doing it. And when that door opens and they saw that news, they all shut off. It freaked them out.
That's awesome.
They did not make enough sound for the rest of the movie because you're so not expecting it, in part because the movie of this era. You don't really think you're seeing a horror movie yet, for instance, and it's so uncanny. I mean, that I think the Freudian uncanny, which is a big part of cat people, obviously, too, you really see it thrumming through this movie where you're seeing things that you can't, that feel both familiar and terrifying, that are close, you know, and there's all this sort of build up to her sister because everyone's saying, you know, Mary keeps saying, you could never forget her if you saw her, and you know, she's so unforgettable.
She is very striking when you do see her too, and like the hair and makeup that they've got her in is played by Jean Brooks.
And speaking of an influence on David Lynch, another the way she's groomed is so iconic, and she barely has any lines in the movie, and is such a haunting figure. So you really have left the criminal procedural and entered this other realm.
Yeah. And that image really does change everything. Like even before, when she's you're kind of doing the more traditional mystery stuff with the character Frances, who tells her to go to the restaurant. Like she has a very, like in her performance, has a very kind of like caring, calming, loving presence, almost just the way she speaks to her. And she's like, oh, she was always talking about you and all of this. And eventually we'll get to the things in between, but like she is part of a cult that is revealed. And so I found that interesting, that she has like this demeanor of welcome and friendship and everything, but she's connected to something that's so dark and kind of going to be what
the movie's pretty open about the idea that like Satanists could attract like good people,
and this is before like, Rosemary's Baby, which is like the same kind of vibe that all those old people prior are doing the same thing where they're like, can we feed you? Can we, what can I do to take care of you?
Inspired, doesn't it? I mean, it's because it
does.
And I had read, you might have read this too, that the screenwriter had actually visited a cult on the Upper West Side of Manhattan that as part of the research, and this was during the war, and they were all in developing incantations and spells and curses against Hitler, and he really enjoyed them, and they were really nice, and he was on their side in wanting to sort of bring down Hitler. So he was sort of charmed that they were, they were all ages, and that all could be apocryphal. Of course, you never really trust a Hollywood screenwriter telling you that. But that's one of the things I love about it is it's not expected. It's not, these are regular.
Well, yeah, because this movie at one point was supposed to be about like an orphan discovering a murder plot in California, and she was going to get like chased around by a killer, and she was going to be like the 7th victim of a serial killer or something. And it was DeWitt Bodine who was the one who was just like, who completely reworked this material into something set in New York instead of California, and also about a sort of satanic cult. And yeah, the fact that he says that he's like, yeah, it was just inspired by running into these people and like actually meeting them, and they were kind of nice and polite, and also believed they were pacifists, but also clearly believed in some really dark and violent ideas. And that's something that's, a contradiction that's explored in the movie, and in particular when you get in, sort of to the closing of it, when we actually find out what was happening to the sister. It takes quite a long time to actually, like, they draw out the mystery for quite a long part of the film, and in a way that I found pretty effective.
They also do a kind of cool subversive thing where at a certain point, like, she's talked to a few people. I think she's talked to, Frances, the restaurant owner, possibly the sister's ex-husband, and at a certain point she goes to a detective, and it seems like they're going to start working together, and then you have a scene where he is just brutally murdered, and you're like, oh, like we're changing things up completely. Like even the person.
Yeah, this movie keeps setting up things I feel like you've seen before, and then tries to like destabilize you from there to be like that you are in something that is so big and unknown that you can't see it. It's just kind of happening.
You can't even trust that the authority figure alongside this younger sister, who would probably benefit from some type of protection in some way with authority, is now just, this guy's murdered. She's on her own completely. And I still love that, like, her character has the determination to solve the mystery and everything. But it is a really cool subversion to have like the kind of trusted, strong character, the one that has the gun or whatever, is now just stabbed, dead. Can't help anymore.
Well, because it's such a statement. Like the fact that in the writing, what's clearly happening here is that we are taking these, like, it's almost like these New York City archetypes. Like you have a nosy poet, the Jason Hogue character, who says shit like, "Look into your heart. Do you really want to find your sister?" Which is a very poetic way of saying you're not going to like what you see at the end of this, most likely. And it's true, she's not. Neither does the sister. But then there's also this kind of very I don't know what you would call, I guess very, I don't know, suave's not the word, but like in the negative determination, the negative connotation of suave, of the attorney character, Gregory Ward, played by Hugh Beaumont, who is her. Yeah, because he doesn't tell her through the whole movie that he's actually her sister's husband, and slowly falls in love with her throughout the movie, which is something that made me go, I don't trust you either, man.
Totally.
Yeah, and also he goes, Jacqueline was just was fascinated with death. That's why she had a room with a chair and a noose in it. You know, she had a feeling about life was only worth living if you could end it, I think is the way that he describes it. And just a very strange character. But then you have the Manhattan private detective, who is Irving August, played by Lou Lubin, and he's the one who offers his services to her, but only for a nice healthy retainer, obviously. But when she can't sort of afford it, he kind of does get curious enough to just like seemingly do it pro bono. And the idea of, this is the character you think that she is going to be latched at the hip to, because this is the guy who's going to go, I'm going to take the young, inexperienced, non-city girl, and I know these streets, I know this place. And that's how he says that while introducing himself.
Right.
And that is a character you expect to spend a lot of this movie with and be her guide through a New York City crime mystery.
Yep.
And instead, it is this extended, very Cat People-esque sequence of him literally disappearing down a dark hallway, which is an incredible image, and how long they hold that shot of him disappearing, and the tension of her waiting for him to reemerge from the shadows, and the beat of the Night's Watchman entering with his keys and his flashlight, and how long they hold this for, only for her to run down the hall, get to the door, and find him stabbed with scissors and collapsed on the floor. And just then, there being blood, and the corpse being picked up by the two goons who start carrying him around the subway in the city.
I think,
and they're
what got me so like, okay, so you already have the mystery aspect of like that, the stronger protector character being killed, and then immediately after, you're on the subway and these two men are carrying him in public, like very confidently about it in a way, and like kind of even leering at her and everything. And it just feels
with the top hats and coats on and stuff too.
It feels like there's something so much bigger at that point, and there definitely is. But it's such a cool way to express that. It's not like she stumbles on the cult or something like that. It's just like it's clear that these men feel powerful enough to get away with whatever they're getting away with.
Completely. It's a terrifying image because of their confidence. And that whole subway scene is incredible. But I think it points to in most conspiracy movies, there's many people seem to be involved. In this movie, everyone is involved. Everyone knows about this call. Everyone in New York seems to know about it. So you feel like, that who is she to trust among any, and then the few people she sort of temporarily trusts, the detective is killed immediately. And she, in fact, was the one who urged him to go down that hallway. So it feels like such a fraught universe. Yet she continues. She's unfazed by, obviously she's appropriately alarmed by everything, but nothing's going to stop her. And I think that's so important for the movie to work, that she keeps persisting, despite all the fact that it's sort of it's like she's in the spider's web.
Yep. 100%. And it's like, and this is actually, I think, what leads into after this is when she has the conversation with Jacqueline's ex-husband. At this point, I think, Josh, you said that it hasn't been revealed that's
also,
who it is.
Is it ex-husband or is it just husband?
Oh, maybe it is just husband.
I think it's just estranged husband because they're not living.
Oh, right.
Yeah. They probably didn't go through the procedure, I imagine, once she joined the cult. But there is that scene afterwards where it's like, she's seen this now. That things have escalated to a point that were beyond what she thought this was going to be, and she still has this kind of focused drive to her that he even recognizes in a way when she says, like, don't speak to me like a child and all of that. So I just think that those moments really are great for her character to kind of just let you know as an audience member that she is very strong-willed, very determined, and so I think it's well,
great. And they're also setting up a romance between these two, which I remembered feeling like was moving a little quickly, and I found out that there was, I guess, some stuff that was deleted that made it make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I kind of love that they cut that, because I think so. There's like 4 big scenes that they cut that explain a lot of things, and I think it really, to me, doesn't lose anything. It contributes to the dreamlike. An uncanny feeling that sometimes it doesn't quite make sense. Like, wait a minute, these two love each other? You sort of miss it, and somehow that all seems to work. There's a later instance where how could they know where she was? And they cut the scene.
Yeah, I think the part I was the most confused by is when we do eventually meet Jacqueline, and she is just like re-kidnapped and taken back to the Satanist house. And I remembered being like, did I miss a scene where she was kidnapped? I was like, I thought she was just talking with all the other characters. I was like kind of confused about that. But yeah, the other ones, just like literalize things you maybe don't need literalizing, and you could have helped.
And it enhances the sense of power that you never get to learn, like how they found out where she was. It
keeps you destabilized, keeps you disoriented in a similar way that obviously this character is experiencing, even when it feels like a character shows up to be like, I have an answer. It's like they never actually do. That was why I kind of liked when Tom Conway's introduced as the sort of mustached psychotherapist who named Dr. Louis Judd, who ends up being like, I was seeing your sister, and he doesn't sort of say it right away, but the idea was that she was involved in this cult. She was trying to leave this cult, and she was talking about the cult to him and how depressed she was and how she felt unsafe and all of these things. And it's presumably he was helping hide her, or he was, even though I spent the whole time being like, he's in this cult or something. I don't know. He's probably, killed her or something. I don't know. I was thinking all these different things. Turns out none of that. He was actually trying to help her escape this cult. And he comes into the movie and says, I know where your sister is. I'm taking care of her. And that's when he leads her to this sort of big old house where she technically does meet her sister, but it's this incredible sequence where she shows up, the sister's not there. There's a burning cigarette in the ashtray to say that she had just been there a few moments ago. He leaves the room to be like, oh my God, I think she's gone, and I can't be here when they get here. And you're like, what is he talking about? And we later figure out he's probably talking about, he thinks the Satanists have either kidnapped her or they're coming for him and her or something. And he very unheroically does not help the sister at all. He just says, you need to be in here, you just sit here while they come and come to get you. And the only he is. And when the sister walks in, she comes in just like scared and just shushes her and then runs away. And again, it's another, just a sort of another hook for you to be like, what is happening? Like, what is this sister, sort of going through? And I think that's when we find out that he is actually the husband, because it turns out there's another private detective who briefly they put up a red herring that like he's the one who told the other private detective to not pursue this case. So you're like, well, this guy must be involved. But instead he's just working for the husband and is doing it for himself. And so I guess he's
yet another moment where she just keeps realizing how much she doesn't really know about any of these people or the people she thought she knew, whether or not it be a stranger or someone.
I don't even know anything about these people at a certain point. At one point, we're hanging out with the one-armed mistress, Natalie Cortez, and who's a Joseph von Sternberg regular, Evelyn Brent is playing her. And I was sitting there, what is this woman's deal? I don't know anything about this woman, and Dr. Judd is just doing card tricks like at her place. Yeah. And this was, part of it is just them cutting scenes. Part of it is maybe deliberate sort of ambiguity, but I found myself a little bit more confused by this movie. Definitely in ways, though, that I found also productive as well as being like, what's happening. It was just a first time watch for me with this one. So I was like,
sort of, we bring our notions of cult, but they don't call themselves a cult. This there were a lot of societies like this in this time, and I think that is sort of how they're conceived as a society that has these philosophical beliefs, right? And that so like now we understand these often to be cults that but I think that sort of one of the sort of way it becomes fascinating to read it now, because our sort of terror is locked in from the start. But the other primary reading of this movie that I think also completely works and explains almost everything is the queer reading of it. I don't know if you've read too much about it.
Yeah, I had seen a couple of people writing about that.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I think it kind of holds through that her sister was gay and was living openly in New York, among other, and that, for instance, the Isabel Jewell character, who later, talks about Jacqueline as my time is with Jacqueline, with the only happy times of my life was her lover, and that it
definitely makes more sense for the frustrated, estranged husband character, and also for how close she is to that Frances character and how tormented the Frances character is by what she's doing to her. I didn't register it on first watch, but reading people talk about it, I was like, and the fact that obviously it's in the Bohemian Greenwich Village as well, which is, like the details are all there if you want to read it that way. Absolutely.
And that like going to the therapist to cure you of your
yes.
predilection, as they would have said in the era, and I think, and hiding it from her sister, which so I think that sort of, and I don't think it's certainly not the answer to it. There's like 10 ways you can read it. There's a mental health reading of it. There's an existentialist reading of it. But I think what's beauty of the openness of it, that everything isn't answered, is that you can, any of those readings can kind of yield riches.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also, just speaking on the Mary, just her being an orphan as well, in a sense, and having the only connection be her sister, and then being in this world where it seems like everybody knows her sister in some way that's deeper than how she knows her, I think is also something that she's trying to unravel the entire time. Like, it's like the one connection she has in the world. She's realizing more and more she doesn't even really understand.
There is literally a different life and a different world out there outside the school.
Yeah.
And she's like, this is crazy.
Yeah, this is wild. Yeah.
And also scary. Like, there are weird women who own cosmetic companies trying to say weird shit to me while I'm in the shower.
And then we're also using like the same symbol that they have on the perfume that represents
the parallelogram from the devil cult is used as the company logo or whatever. Yeah. That's fantastic. But the shower scene too, I went, oh my God, talk about proto Rosemary's Baby, proto Psycho.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really one of the spookiest scenes. And I have never seen a version before Psycho where you have that shadow behind the shower curtain. And
the fact that it looks like she has like the little devil horns like through the thing, and it's through this like wet frosted see-through curtain that just makes her silhouetted, and the fact that they maintain this conversation where she's just basically telling her, you have to leave. It's the opposite of what the girl says at the school. You need to go back to school, and also your sister is a murderess who killed that private detective, and like that is, and it turns out that actually ends up being true, but when Jacqueline ends up explaining it, she's just like, you understand why she did it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It kind of reminded me of like just the shadow element of it, and just kind of like how it's unveiling a mystery, and there's a warning, but you're not quite sure of what's happening yet. You just know there's a danger. There's even like that Suspiria scene when they're in the gym and there's the witch is in that silhouetted shadow or whatever. It just feels like there's something we're not quite sure about, but we know that this is unsettling and haunting and dangerous.
Definitely. It is such a invasion of intimacy. I think it's so like the woman suddenly shows up in the bathroom. It sort of again emphasizes sort of how alone Mary is, and has she doesn't know anyone who she can trust, and she's sort of got to go by her instincts. But we're constantly worried for her because we don't trust anybody at this point. Maybe the Italian couple, but other than that, everyone else seems suspect.
Yeah. No, it's a really, really crazy sequence, and again sets the stage for what is obviously this mystery goes so much deeper. The idea that, this woman didn't buy my sister's company from her; she was given it as part of this weird pact that she has with this like this cult, and the fact that all of this is connected to her trying to leave the cult, even though the cult declares itself as non-violent. They also deem any traitors who talk about the cult essentially that basically need to be killed, and it's where the title comes from, that they've had 6 traitors, and they now have a 7th traitor in Jacqueline, who had been sort of conscripted into it, had grown kind of miserable and depressed, and sort of confessed its existence. And, you know, that is why she has been sort of fearfully hiding under the assumption that they are sending assassins to kill her, essentially, which, to be fair, they are actually talking about and making plans to do in a couple of the scenes that we see her. And when she explains her version of what like being imprisoned was like, because essentially before hiring assassins, they essentially just try to coax you into killing yourself. And they said that she describes being essentially the idea of that room that she rented was that they would basically just like leave you in that room, and they would just be like, there's no other option, you just have to kill yourself, and they would make you not able to see anyone, and she describes the fact that what was happening was that when Irving walked into that shadowy room, she had been being psychologically tormented for days on end, trying to influence her to kill herself. And so when someone came in, she was like, this is one of the cult members. She grabbed scissors and stabbed him. And that was all that happened. And it's again, a pretty clever way of getting that really horrible sequence of that guy's death that scares you, having the twist that the sister did it, and then actually finding a way out of that to be like, but wasn't it kind of understandable that she did it? It's actually the reverse of Detour, because you're like, that's actually a very understandable reason to kill someone.
Yeah.
Even though poor private detective, he was just trying to help out.
The one scene that I think this is a little further too, so I hope I'm not skipping too much. We can go back to it, but the scene where they're
she gets kidnapped right away. By the way, after that, and I like that they, as soon as they do the kind of shadow shower thing, pretty much immediately they're like, here's the cult, like here's the society, here are all the people. We're going to talk about the plan. They are kind of just out in broad daylight. You're surprised it's a secret.
Yeah, exactly. They're very open about it all of a sudden, and so I liked that it's like we're just going right into this, and then it's just about their power of like that, you know, them trying to convince Jacqueline to actually kill herself, which in that scene is wild. Like them, all 6 of them kind of pushing her towards it for sure. But then they're even saying things like, you've always told us that you wanted to kill yourself, so why can't you just do it now? Like it's dialogue that I don't think I've ever really even heard before.
Yeah, like literally exploiting mental health problems at that point.
Exactly.
You feel crazy when you can't believe that they're just telling her to kill her. You can't believe that like suicide, you know, sort of is such an open topic in this movie, and it really is, and it's such a she's such an extraordinary actress, Jean Brooks, and she does so much with her face and how she carries herself. She's just like this little fawn, you know. She's so sort of stunning, but you're so worried for her. But she remains in large part an enigma, because she reveals so little, and yet we worry, we're terrified for her. And I had read, maybe you'd read too, that she was in the middle of a divorce during the making of this movie, and
I didn't know that.
She, from her husband, whom she adored, Richard Brooks, who's a writer, and he left her, and she started drinking, and her drinking became a bit of a problem on that movie, and then continued, and she sort of descended into alcoholism, which I think gives everything. I mean, talking about a backstory again, adding this is a different kind of tragic story that's sort of hovering.
Yeah, that scene of her in like a haze in front of that fireplace in the chair, and all of these people just trying to both pressure but also maybe hypnotize her into basically drinking this poison wine chalice right in front of her. It's incredible imagery. But yeah, her performance of just being like, I'm in a daze, I'm going to be held here until I do this, and having Francis just like beg her, like, put yourself out of this misery. I can't stand to watch this woman I clearly have feelings for, like, go through this. And then, but as she, and that moment on Brooks's face when she does relent and go, do you know what? Yeah, sure. Why not? This is too much. Maybe I should just do it. And she goes to reach for it, and Francis like slaps it out of her hand.
You know? Yeah. Yeah. It's that moment where, and the irony too of Francis being in this society or in this cult, knowing the rules. There's even a part where they're trying to convince Jacqueline to do it, where they're just like, this is your duty. Like, what this entails. You've signed up for this kind of thing. And there is something to be said, I guess, just in Frances's reaction that she's like just totally emotionally overwhelmed that doesn't matter to her anymore or anything like that.
Yeah.
And the whole, like, to the line, like, you were always so good to me, suggesting like really at the very least a very close friendship. And again, speaking on Jean Brooks's performance, the subtlety of her performance I think is really great. You'd almost expect, just given the abuse and given like and especially the implied like time of abuse, that she would be more just expressive with that pain. But I think it's a smart choice to kind of be laid back. Like, it's almost like she's grown a callus to it or something. Like, she's so used to it, or something along those lines. And I think there's some great stuff there.
Yeah, well, it ends up sort of climaxing on this classic Val Lewton sort of suspense sequence, essentially. Feels straight out of Cat People, where she ends up, because Frances knocks it out of her hand, they do actually sort of let her walk through the door, and there's a fantastic shot of her in her fur coat, completely silhouetted in that door frame as she's leaving, and she enters the streets. And here you have, I guess, the same thing you could say as Detour, where there's the ominous otherworldly fear of the city, because instead of being this like weird hazy fog, it is this labyrinth where every man in an alley or every shadow is possibly a satanic assassin. And she's right to think that, because one of them actually is a man chasing her down, grabbing her, flipping out a switchblade. And the only reason she is not killed in that sequence is because there is an acting troupe in Greenwich Village just like going for a night of drinking that ends up interrupting this murder. But all of that sequence is just done through framing and through shadow and through architecture. And it is a really, really fantastically creepy scene. And it's so important because at this point, the mood and atmosphere of the film is so punishing and so disorienting that part of what I was saying when we started this conversation was that it's making the argument for death. And it really does feel like by the time you get to this sequence, you are kind of like, I am in such a perpetual state of fear and anxiety for 60 minutes. I'd just rather die. I would actually just rather die. And the fact that I was kind of feeling that sense of fatalism and I was kind of having that reaction to the movie somehow did still not prepare me for the fact that she literally just goes and kills herself, and that's the end of the movie. And I was like, are you serious?
While talking to somebody that is like a terminal illness and is saying like, well, on my last night, if this is my last night, I'm going to go celebrate life. I'm going to go dance and I'm going to go laugh and I'm going to do whatever I can. And she's just at this point. Yeah,
it's someone who's dying who doesn't want to versus someone who is living who absolutely needs to die and wants to die.
It's so haunting. It feels like the key, doesn't it? Like somehow
it does.
That she's, somehow the psychology of it is quite complex, but because that woman, Mimi, who from Cat People, that like such a striking woman, but has consumption and is slowly dying, tuberculosis, that she is going to go out somehow enables Jacqueline to die. It's a fascinating kind of, the darkness is transferred over from one to the other.
And that sound design of her, just of like the rope snapping and the chair falling and her sort of registering that she heard it but not knowing what it was, but us having all of that visual suggestion throughout the entire film and the setup to know exactly what that sound was, is a really, really haunting ending.
Yeah, it's also it's really interesting too, because it's like at the end of the day, the cult did want her to do that, but in the sense, it feels as if because of her escape and because it's like she's making it on her own decision rather than like taking the potion that gives it to her. It's just interesting to me that it still results in the same thing. Like the cult still technically gets what they want, which is also kind of haunting.
Because the cult still made the air of anxiety that was around her at all times, right?
So like it was technically just they did do it. Like they did exactly what they set out to do, which is really like it's like you want to give her some type of power with her decision, but then at the same time it strips it away a little bit just because that like this is what the cult was ultimately trying to get at. So it's really haunting. Like it's one of those things that I don't know if I've ever really seen something so haunting in this decade in particular. I was reading the musical score here, and I don't know how true this is because it's just on Wiki, but it says that it's possibly one of the only Hollywood film scores of this period to end in a minor key. Because again, we were talking about it, Josh, we've talked about it for the last couple of weeks with this kind of thing where it like ends. It has to end major. It has to end some type of orchestral sweep or whatever. And this one's like, no, we're ending on a suicide, and the sound of a thud and a minor key. It's crazy. Like I can't even believe they got away with it, to be honest.
And it's so funny because they sort of use the production code against them because she needs to be punished for her crime.
Right.
So,
I didn't even think of that.
So it's sort of like the ultimate, just like Detour, they find a way to sort of give the finger to the production code. Like, this is what you want, this is what you get.
Double feature of filmmakers being creative with the production code and getting their bleak endings in anyway.
I had read they shot a scene with Mary and the Hugh Beaumont character at like a happy ending. I'm so glad they cut it. I get.
Oh yeah,
we've all seen those movies where they have to tack on the happy ending, and it's such a perfect ending because you just feel completely knocked down by it. It's so devastating, and so
even though, by the way, in that a supposed happy ending, because it's Gregory and Mary going off together, it still ended apparently with the poet character basically being the one who feels like he was like he was interested in Mary, and so he obviously doesn't. It's not a three-way relationship. He's the one who gets left behind, and he says that he ends up sort of feeling like sort of left out of that, and he's the one who gets the final lines, which by the way included "Death can be good, death can be happy."
Holy shit!
I love it. Oh.
Yeah.
And that poor actor died.
I imagine Val Lewton literally wrote those lines.
I love it. He's so good in this too. He died like a year later in the war, which is so sad. But he does feel like the one Mary's supposed to end up with. That's why that switch. He seems so much more sensitive, obviously. But
because he's like he seems like an annoying artist when you first meet him, but then when he's like, I'm gonna find your sister, he's the one who actually goes to the library and researches the Satanists, and he's the one who puts the work in, whereas like all the husband does is kind of like throw his money at the doctor and also like lies to her. Like it's kind of a weird thing that they ended up sort of like. So I am kind of glad that I don't get a scene of those two romantically going off with each other. I feel like I don't need that. In this movie, I do prefer the sort of really grim final notes they hit here, which the only thing, honestly, again, I don't know why Lynch is just the thing that's on the mind recently, but again, I thought of Lynch only because I feel like the only other thing I've seen that has a similar sort of final note like this was Fire Walk with Me.
Oh, sure.
Just in the sense that I feel like that movie is such a bludgeoning, suffering experience. It's one of the most empathetic horror movies that's ever been made, because it's just, here was this woman's experience, and you sit there the whole time being like, the mystery, that this girl dies. And by the time you get to the end of that, you're like, thank God she died. Like, what a horrible, miserable experience. And like, death brought some sort of release. Like, the moment that film ends and she's somewhere else, you're like, well, at least her dad can't get her there, or like, that's how you kind of feel about it. And I felt similarly here, where it feels like the whole movie is formally constructed to get you to understand, or at least feel something for the fact that this woman kills herself and her existence was so punishing that it felt like an understandable thing for someone to do. And clearly Val Lewton believed that, or at least jokingly believed that in some capacity.
Because to your point, Jamie, about that there is some kind of power she gets to have at the end there, which I think also in Fire Walk with Me, Lynch gives her the power of owning
exactly.
And I think that's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's such a feel bad runway to that moment, right?
It really is.
It's so anxious, it's so depressed, and just really through atmosphere.
And at first, again, it kind of like the first, I don't know if it's even half, but because this movie is like 70 minutes long, but first 20 minutes or so is kind of just easing you into it, where it's like you think it's going to be a more classic mystery noir, and then it just turns into pure satanic evil, and it's kind of awesome.
It is. It's a real big switch.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but it's a fantastic movie, and I think pivoting towards reductive rating around, I think on first watch, this is a very, very strong 4 for me. I do see myself kind of coming back to this one. I think I watched this, and I definitely could see a lot of the things that I saw in Cat People and I Walked with a Zombie, and it made a lot of sense when I looked this up, and I went, oh, this is literally every single person who worked on Cat People worked on this movie except for Jacques Turner. And I do think that Robson, for the most part, does a really good substitute job of coming in and being like, I'm not a director, but I watch these guys work together. I know what the project is. I know how to do these tragic, lonely, sort of psychosexual horror dramas on these shoestring budgets, and how to weaponize the sort of expressionist lighting and shadows and sets and everything that we plan on doing in order to get across what is, I think, one of Val Lewton's more bold just screenplays that he produced and greenlit, because it is really a paranoid conspiracy horror noir that is using obviously these B-noir sort of techniques, but is doing so in a way that everything about it that you think is a crime procedural, whether it's she gets to the city and she runs into these archetypes and she hangs out with the detective, every single thing leads to just this incredibly anxious and depressed mystery involving locked rooms with nooses hanging from them, or private detectives, a scene after you meet them getting gutted with scissors in a menacing hallway, and a secret society of Greenwich Village fucking Satanists that again had to have inspired Rosemary's Baby. And so, all of that left me constantly, just a sense of nihilism and menace, and at times a little bit of a disorienting frustration, but in a way that like clearly is also by design. And there, again, something unsettling and very dreamy and ominous about this entire thing. And I do think all of the readings about it, where you can go into it and like, what is it that the sister is going through? Like, is this meant to be your sister went to the city and became a different person? Is it she is trying to, she's trying to have a queer relationship, and instead, she's finding herself, talking to the psychiatrist and having an estranged husband after her, and having, and then the cult's like, you can't leave. And that's a weird reading of it too, because if you're trying to make the cult sort of like a gay cult, which I don't know, maybe that is meant to be the reading, and you're like,
I think that's more like the idea of the closet, right? Yeah,
exactly. But there's, again, I think to your point, Megan, everything about how ambiguous they leave it is where its kind of power comes from. It's where both of these, where this sort of B horror, B noir, I think power had to come from in the best ones. You had to use the limitations and the minimalism to your advantage. And in terms of building sequences like that shower sequence and that attempt to coax her into suicide in front of the fireplace with the chalice, and the build up to the ending, it is a kind of torturous and hypnotic movie in a way. Yeah. So I can see myself, I think, coming back to this one and liking it just as much as I like Cat People and I Walked with a Zombie.
Yeah, I'm at the 4 as well. I did wrestle with it just because I like some of the elements as they were unraveling were not, I don't even want to say confusing, just almost like jarring to a point. But as this conversation's gone on, I've really come to appreciate all of even the things that are missing. Like it kind of like Detour, with some of the loose elements of the filmmaking, just taking out some of the stuff that might have contextualized more things. I think it leans into the intrigue of the mystery. And so I think it ends up really working that way. I think Kim Hunter is really great as Mary. Like she kind of gives this more, like, she's very strong-willed still, but just a more innocent perspective going into something so seemingly evil. And then Jean Brooks just like, honestly isn't even being that expressive, but I think, again, like I said earlier, it has this like callous effect that so much has happened that she's almost used to it and just kind of on her way out mentally. And I think it's a really good choice. There's also the Rosemary's Baby and Psycho prototype elements are really wild. Psycho is the obvious one, and it just image wise with the shower and the shadow and everything like that. But just the general idea of Rosemary's Baby is pretty much locked into this, like the whole thing with the gaslighting and then kind of like forcing you into a ritual sacrifice of some kind. And it's all these like what seemingly seems to be these very mature people of society that are very wealthy and well put together and everything like that. So just having all those elements, I don't know, what is it, 20 years before Rosemary's Baby, something like that is pretty crazy. And let me see. There was also another. So this was kind of relating to Detour. Both these movies, I just don't think work in color whatsoever. Like, it has to be black and white to get that mood. I was actually gonna watch Detour on Amazon, and they have the colorized version, and immediately I was like, nope, I'm getting the black and white. There's just no way. But it's like, when you watch these things, when you watch all the shadow work and those like really dark elements at night on the streets and stuff, it's just like, you can't have the color involved. You have to have that, like, sucked out of it. It just needs to be the shadowy kind of, it feels like, especially with Detour, but both of these, there's this like guilty, tired darkness to it all, and the black and white just expresses it perfectly. I love the complicated ending. I still need to think on it. It does feel very complicated, but I think there's a lot there within Jacqueline's character that it's both like powerful for her, but then also kind of giving over to the cult, which makes me feel almost like good for her, but also terrible that this system still has power or whatever it is. So there's some complications there that I think are intriguing. And the last thing I wanted to mention was just, I did find it to be kind of funny in the moment where they go into the cult living room and they're just like, we're going to recite the Lord's Prayer. Take that, you sons of bitches. Like, I thought that was kind of funny. I kind of get it, but it's like... That
is a weirdly heroic moment for those two guys that I don't know is meant to be.
It's very funny to me. But
I think it is meant to be. I just don't know that it actually is.
That it works. Yeah, I kind of laughed a little bit and thought it was silly. I understand it's like kind of a product of the times in a way as well. But regardless, it was kind of silly. But no, this is great stuff. I would highly recommend it. 4 out of 5.
Yeah, so for me, I think the first time I saw it, I would have said 4 stars. Now I'm up to 5, just because I think, like we were discussing, it's so rich, and the more you watch it, the more it reveals itself. And I think its sort of gaps are just the places that the viewer gets to come in, and that's why we feel it so intensely, as we're trying to piece it together. So we sort of enter the story, and it starts to feel like a nightmare we're having, and that intensity is it couldn't be any longer than it is, because it's held at such a pitch. So it is a kind of release at the end. Mm-hmm. So it's just a total knockout for me, and just an endlessly rich text, full of possibilities. I think Mark Robson talked about this, directing it for the actors, having them speak in hushed tones throughout, that there was this sense that something bad was coming, that there was destruction was in the distance. And I think that to keep that tone throughout is just sort of a masterclass. Val Lewton never misses, does he? So yes, no. 5 for me.
Awesome.
Amazing. All right. Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for The Seventh Victim and for this week's episode, though. That was once again a Detour from 1945 and The Seventh Victim from 1933. Megan, thank you so much for joining us and for bringing these films and lending us your knowledge about this stuff. It has been a delight.
Oh, it was such a sheer pleasure to talk about such dark and nihilistic movies.
Always.
Exactly. No, we love it around here. But this is usually the part of the show where if you've got anything to plug or point people towards, we would love to do that. I know that you had a new book that came out this year.
Yeah, I have a new book called Eldorado Drive. It's a thriller about complicated women doing bad things, which is what most of my books are. And I have a couple things coming for Criterion. I wrote the essay on Eyes Wide Shut that comes out in November, so this month.
Amazing.
So. Awesome.
Oh my God. Okay, I've
movie.
Already got mine pre-ordered, so I will be reading it while I probably watch it over the holidays, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Best Christmas movie.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, no, amazing. Awesome. Yeah, definitely go. We will have a link to Megan's work in the description. Mm-hmm. We recommend going and checking it out. For our listeners, we're going to be back in 1 week's time where, just pulling this up here, what are we going to be doing? Oh, right. We're going to be doing the Robert Mitchum double feature over on the Patreon. We're going to be doing, speaking, again, these connections just happen. We don't even intend them. Jacques Turner's Ed of the Past.
Awesome.
Because we've never covered that. It's one of my favorite noir films. And we're actually going to be pairing it with the neo-noir film Friends of Eddie Coyle. two different eras of Robert Mitchum. So we're excited to do that exclusively on the Patreon next week. And then in 2 weeks' time, actually, we have a very fun pairing with a guest where we're going to be sticking around in the neo-noir realm, and we're going to be talking about Coffee, starring Pam Grier, because we've somehow actually never talked about, I don't think we've actually had the conversation about Pam Grier yet, so it's going to be a lot of fun to do. But the guest wanted to pair it with another sort of female-led crime film, Set It Off.
Sweet.
Which I can't remember if you've seen that or not, Jamie.
I don't. Let me double check. Because
I saw it on a print at TIFF just like 2 years ago by F. Gary Gray and with Jada Pinkett Smith and Queen Latifah, and I was like, Vivica A. Fox, and I was kind of blown away by it. So I'm very excited to talk about these sort of black female-led crime films.
Yeah, this is one I've had on my list forever. I'm actually so stoked to watch this. Yeah, that's awesome.
Awesome. So we're sticking around in the crime wave and the noir and neo-noirs for the rest of the month. So stick around. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.